My name is Igor. I started working with Magento 1 at 2009 as system integrator. A little bit more than a year ago, I joined Magento. I live in Austin. Time to time, I attend local Magento meetups. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. My presentation today is about content staging and preview, a new Magento Enterprise 2.1 feature. I'm going to talk about functionality. I will give a brief overview. Then I'm going to focus on architecture and talk about main aspects of writing a module that works with staging. So customers come to online stores to browse catalogs, read product descriptions, add products to cart, add promotions, and eventually place orders. So content is very important, and every merchant takes a lot of time to maintain his store. And prior to Magento Enterprise Edition 2.1, the workflow could look like this. You have a separate copy of your store where you do changes. Then you need to make sure the changes looks good. Then on scheduled date, you manually move these changes to production. Then you need to make sure again the changes looks good. And if you forgot to move something, you would need to troubleshoot and solve issues. So it takes a lot of time. And we've been asked a lot to improve in this area. So in Magento 2.1, in Magento Enterprise Edition 2.1, we added the staging and preview feature that allows to make changes in one place. Then you can make sure that changes looks good using a preview, and you can change you can schedule when changes will be applied. Then changes will be applied automatically. You don't need to worry about that. And it is very convenient if you have a high traffic store. You don't need to stay up very late to wait until traffic goes down. Staging will roll out changes automatically. Now let's take a look closer at what staging and preview has to offer. So first of all, you can create, edit, and delete updates to site content. You can group these updates into different campaigns, and you can have unlimited number of updates. On the edit page, you can see a grid with upcoming updates. You can edit each of the individual updates. You can jump to the preview, and you can create new update without leaving a page, single page. Also, there is a staging dashboard. Staging dashboard gives you greater visibility over your campaigns. You can see what is included in every campaign. You can see status of your campaigns. You can see start and end dates. You can go to the preview. You can edit the campaign, and there you will see individual updates in the campaign, and you will be able to edit these updates. Another variation of staging dashboard is a timeline view. It offers the same functionality, but it has a look of a calendar. Personally, I like it better, and it's amazing that our UI components is mature enough to be able to use for this kind of complex interface. Another important part of staging and preview is the preview itself. You can, when you edit the campaign or when you edit individual update, you can go to the preview and see how this content will look like when it will be visible for the customers, and you can make sure that customers will have the right experience. You can preview changes for a particular store view. You can preview everything. You can preview products, changes to the catalog. You can even apply catalog rules and shopping cart rules. And when you previewing changes, you can also select a different campaign and see changes for that particular campaign without leaving the preview. It's very convenient. If you're writing custom extensions, especially if you're writing custom extensions that customize stageable entities, or you want your extension to work with and without staging, it is important to understand the staging architecture. Let's take a look at the big picture of staging architecture, and I will talk about each of the pieces of the next slide, but let's see what are the main parts first. So in the heart of staging is changes to database schema. Some of you probably already noticed that in Magento Enterprise we have additional fields added to stageable entities tables. I will talk about that on the next slide. Also, we introduced Entity Manager. It's ORM framework. Currently, it is used only by staging, but in the future, it will be recommended way to persist your entities. Entity Manager delegates all work to the operations, and staging has its own implementation of the operations to perform additional logic. Also, in your application, you always need to have a current version. So from condition renderer and version manager, make sure that in your application you always get a current version. We have a staging module that contains business logic that applies to all entities, and we also have modules that ends with staging, for instance, catalog staging or CMS staging. These modules extend original modules to add the staging behavior. Some actions being done by cron jobs, for instance, applying updates, and configurable UI elements. They are really part of the staging module, but I decided to separate them only to highlight that they are already available, and you don't need to create them. If you want to add staging to your module, you will just need to configure existing elements or UI components, and you will get good-looking UI. Let's take a look at changes to database schema. So to describe changes to database schema, I will use catalog product entity as example, but the following changes apply to other entities as well. So if you look at the catalog product entity table, you would notice that entity ID is not a unique field anymore. There is a row ID and its primary key now. Entity ID has a different meaning in staging. It's sequence ID, and sequence ID is the same for all of the versions of a particular entity. For instance, if you have a product A, and this product has two versions, then you will have the same ID for these two versions, but product B will have a different sequence ID. In staging, you could have stageable and non-stageable attributes. Stageable attribute means that in the other versions, this attribute could have a different value. And staging attributes linked to the main table by linked ID, and non-stageable entities linked to the main entity by sequence ID. We also have created in and updated in fields. These two fields specify version. I will talk about that on the next slide. Station update table contains updates for all of the entities in the system. The information about the version only, because updates themselves, they stored into the same tables. So in your product entity table, you will have multiple versions of the same entity. And there is also sequence tables, and they are used to generate sequence identifier. Now let's take a look what the version is and how Magento determines the version. So created in is a version from which entity is active, and default is 1. Updated in is version to which entity is active, and default is max value of integer. 1 and max value of integer are the left and right margins for the version, and user created in and updated in equals to left and right margins. That means that entity is always active. It's active from the beginning to end. If you take a look at the table, you will see that we have two products, and first product has created in 1 and updated in 999. Let's agree that right margin for the version is 999 because I will be talking about versions on the next slides just for simplicity. This means that this product is always active. The second product has created in 200 and updated in 999. That means that this product will become active from version 200 and will be active after that version all the time. Now let's take a look how Magento selects current version. So we have a station update table that contains versions for all of the entities in the system, and at any given time we can select active version using the following query. So there is a condition, start time less or equals current date, ordered by ID, and we select first row. That will give us current active version. It's very simple. Now, let's take a look. Now we have the current version. Let's take a look how we select active updates. So in our table, we have two products, product 1 and product 2. Product 2 has 3 versions. And you can see that in version 2 we have different price, and in version 3 we have a different description. If you look at the diagram below, you will see that product 1 is active from the version 1 to version 999. It's active all the time. But product 2 is not active anymore from version 1 to version 200. And it's not active yet from version 300 to 999. When we select active versions, we add the following condition: created in less or equals current version and updated in greater than current version. This allows us to select updates that already started and still active. This is the actual conditions that Magento uses. In Station, we have permanent and temporary updates. Permanent updates don't have an end date. And when you create a permanent update, Magento just adds another row to your product entity table and stores information about the version to the Station update table. Now, notice that is rollback is 0. In this case, it will become more clear why on the next slide. it is a little bit different with a temporary update. Temporary update has end date, and when you create a temporary update, Magento actually creates 2 rows, and here's why. So temporary update has end date, and Magento needs somehow to know how to go back to the previous version after temporary update expires. And for this purpose, Magento creates another system update that will become active after temporary update expires. This is a system update. It's called rollback, and this is why its rollback is 1. So I mentioned Entity Manager on the big picture slide. It's our new ORM. The Entity Manager class is the entry point. It delegates all the operations, for instance, create, read, or update, and others to operation interface. Operation interface uses processors to persist each kind of data, for instance, main entity, AV attributes, relation and extension attributes. Processor uses handlers to perform persistence of the relations, because you could have different logic for every type of relations. This is why you can configure this processor to use handlers. It's very configurable, and the main idea that in the future you will be able to save your entities by the data interface. You will not be required to extend the abstract model anymore. We currently working on a lot of improvements in this area. If you want to hear more, find me about the presentation. So Entity Manager has its own, staging has its own operations for staging for Entity Manager, because we need to perform additional logic. In addition to managing updates, we may need to manage multiple updates, and we also manage information about the version. We have a from SQL condition renderer, and the purpose of the from SQL condition renderer is to make sure that you always get current version in your application. If you use a database adapter to construct your query, when you render the actual query, database adapter will check if you use if this entity is stageable entity, and if yes, it automatically will add the condition to the SQL select. And this way, every time you load your entity or collection of entities, you always get current versions. You don't need to worry about these conditions in your code. Version Manager and the Sequence Manager. The Version Manager provides current version in the system, and Sequence Manager just generates a sequence identifier for all of the entities in the system. Staging uses cron jobs to apply updates. Also, if you have you could have campaigns, and when you change dates for the campaign, Magento actually creates another campaign, and moving items from the old campaign to a new one in the crop job. This is done for performance reasons, because you could have a lot of updates in one campaign, and when you change dates for the campaign, Magento need to update every update. Also, we have cron jobs to clean up all the updates. This is also done for performance reasons. It is interesting how the preview functionality works. When you open a preview page, Magento the version manager supplies the requested version, and all of the data are being calculated on the fly, so it's always up to date. Preview bypasses full page cache, but it uses all other cache type to provide optimal performance. And if you have some sort of storage for pre-generated data, for instance, indexes, they also skipped at preview. Also, if you have any customizations to your pages, you will see them at the preview because you are looking at the actual pages that display data. The only thing that is different is the data itself. So let's talk about main aspects of writing custom module that has staging functionality. Let's say that a product owner came to us with the following requirements. We need to be able to display and manage blog posts. Posts need to have the following fields, title and description. Module should work in both community and enterprise editions. An enterprise edition should allow schedule updates for posts, see upcoming updates in staging dashboard, and preview the changes. I actually already created this module, and you will see a link to the repository on the resources slide. I'm going to create a pull request to Magento sample modules repository once I add code coverage and go through formal code review process. We have a very strict definition of done in Magento. But now you can take a look at the implementation, and if you have Magento Enterprise, try to install and play with it. I think it's very interesting. So persistence is the main part. In Magento Community Edition and Enterprise, we have different schemas. So in Enterprise Edition, you will create an install script to modify original schema. Because we have different schemas, we would need to configure every entity manager to use these schemas. It's just a DI configuration. Also, you would need to specify to use staging operations in the enterprise module instead of original ones. The big part of the module is the UI interface, but it's already done. So you just need to configure existing UI components, and you will get a UI. The only thing that you would need to do, you would need to create the data providers and controllers to process, save, and delete of your updates. But you will get all the grids, all the forms, and update information about your entity will be automatically added to the staging dashboard. And the last but important piece is to provide the API for managing updates. And it's actually very simple. You would need to implement two actions, two methods to schedule and unschedule. And in basic implementation, it's just passing required information to the entity manager. It is actually very simple. So this is pretty much it. Take a picture of resources slide. The first link is to the repository with sample modules, and the second link is documentation about staging.